can't see him. I really enjoyed you at the Paina in Kona. And I have a question today. You know, they always contrast the Tower of Babel with the day of Pentecost. And gifts were given, and just as they contrast the speaking in tongues, which were actual languages at Pentecost. And today, some people say, well, does that really happen today? You know, do people really speak in the spirit of Pentecost in new languages rather than glossolalia? The question I have is, gifts were given at every ordination. Gifts are given, and there's also the gift of prophecy, of being a prophet, in the time of the early church. Now today, 2,000 years later, are people still prophets today? Are they still having the same spirit of prophecy? Because you just said, you know, to be prophetic. So that's my question.
Well, the wonderful thing about Pentecost, for me, the miracle lies not so much in all those languages that they were speaking, but they were speaking all those languages. But all those languages were only saying one thing: the glory of God. That's what it's all about. And the power of what is let loose upon all people. And so they could have kept all those tongues of fire for themselves. What they were doing with the languages is sharing what the tongues of fire inspired in them. So everybody, I mean, that is the word of the prophet, that everybody, the young and the old, even older, Moses, when they complained to him about those who prophesied without being authorized, as, oh, that all the people of God were prophets. That's what I believe. That's still the sigh in the heart of God. Oh, that all the people of God were prophets. Pentecost tells me that because it is not us, and because it has nothing to do with our doing, and because it has got nothing to do with our ability, on the other hand, it's got everything to do with our availability. Whoever avails themselves to the power of the Spirit can become a prophet. Now, one doesn't have to be a prophet, I think, in all of the same ways. Some of us are called to be prophets in different ways, but all of us are called to stand up and to discern that moment, that kairos moment of truth in which you now know. Whatever else I think of myself, this is a truth that now needs to be spoken. But again, all of this is because of the Holy Spirit. It's not our ability, it's our availability. And if we would really just understand that. But it's a calling still, yes, and I do believe that God has given the church prophets, and sometimes there is only one or two or here and there, but they're always there. Why? So that nobody can say that there ever was a time that God has left God's people without the prophetic moment. And so if we just see, and if we can just find the courage, I think it can be possible, yes. Otherwise, what does Pentecost mean, really?
Thank you, Allan. You made the verses of the Bible very exciting. Not many here may know or remember how you used in the early 1980s that verse from Joshua 9:23, used by the White Dutch Reformed Church to legitimize apartheid. Joshua making the Gibeonites hewers of wood and drawers of water, and how you use that to challenge the member churches of WARC to call apartheid a heresy. Now there are 4 documents that have this type of background that are being revisited. 2 by the Pope Nicholas V, 1452, Dum Diversitas, 1455, Romanus Pontifex, Doctrine of Discovery, Manifest Destiny, that have this type of background. smiting the Amorites and Gibeonites, and in that sense, even say, with the edge of the sword, until they had destroyed them, and they did not leave any that breathed. And how in the General Synod soon, there is a resolution to revisit this item, and WCC's 10th Assembly in Busan to see how WCC disowns the doctrine of discovery that has been used to dehumanize indigenous people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It always scares me when you remember so precisely what I said. I always try to forget what I said so long ago. I always say to God, oh, I may have said a lot of stuff in those days that may mean nothing at all. So just please forgive me. Write it off to the rashness of my youth. But no, thank you. But that's very, very important. I hope when we revisit those texts, that we will actually try to revisit, not in the sense of saying, you see how the Bible is this dangerous book that we have to avoid at all costs, or have as little to do with as possible. So when we preach, we now have to read the text from the Bible, but let's get on to the stories that we want to tell as soon as possible. But that we say, there's a reason why these stories are written like that. I really do think that so much of the Bible is told to us in order to let us see this is exactly what God would not want. This is what happens if you claim my name upon your own sinful desires. One of the things that I hope that I might be able to do before I get too old is to write on this violence issue. But I want to write on the violence issue by my own rereading of the book of Judges. It's probably one of the most violent books in the Bible. And I really do believe that those stories are told to let us see this is what happens when you let go of God. That verse that runs like a red thread through Judges. There was no king in Israel, and everybody did was right in their own eyes. It was saying, you see, they depended so much on this king. They forgot it's not about the king. It's about God. And so there was no king in Israel, and everybody did what was good in their own eyes. It's really saying, well, we were looking at the king, and now we're all confused because we forgot that it's not the king. It's actually about God. That's how I would approach it. Now we'll see how it works out. And if it makes sense, we will see. But I really have this desire for us. I sat in a seminar the other day in which a very well-known, wonderful Old Testament theologian says, oh no, God is a God of violence, but God is like a recovering alcoholic on this point. And I said to him, what do you mean? So as time goes on, God will become more gentle, and when God recovers from God's lust of violence, when will that be? And who will make that decision? Who will determine when that is? I really don't believe that. I believe the God of violence that we see in the Bible is exactly what God had warned against. It's the God of our own making. Because the God of peace and the God of love and the God of mercy is just too difficult for us to handle. That God is such a wimp that we find it embarrassing to have a God who talks about love and mercy and forgiveness and all of that stuff. I mean, there's in the middle of Hosea and lots of stuff. There is this amazing text which says that I have picked you up and held you cheek to cheek, God says. Cheek to cheek. Now, who wants a God that says cheek to cheek? I'd rather have a God that stands on a chariot, right? So that when God drives through the world and his sword in his hand, I can stand right behind and say, now you watch it. God is coming, which really means I'm coming. No. The violence thing is and at the heart of all those ideologies, whether it's manifest destiny or this chosenness or this election thing, at the heart of it all is violence. and my right to inflict violence upon you because I am the chosen one. I think when Calvin talks about the wounds of God, maybe we should have a paragraph next to that about the tears of God. We will never be able to atone for the tears we make God cry because of us. And so that's, it's probably one of the most important things, because I'm not just talking about war. I'm talking about all these horrific forms of violence that we think of. Domestic violence is now a pandemic. They write in the report of the United Nations. A peak in all countries of the world. South Africa has become the rape capital of the world. I mean, we have instances where we rape 3-year-old babies. Where does that come from? And so if you justify the violence of bombs or drones, what right do you have to condemn the violence against women or children? It's all the same poisonous well from which we drink. It's all the same altar before which we bow. It's all the same God that we worship. And that's how the church should talk about this. It's our blasphemous tendencies that needs to be condemned. So I hope the World Council of Churches discussion will really open up a new kind of discourse about all of this.
And the conversation that will happen, as Trulock was saying, at the United Church of Christ General Synod as well. We're going to press pause. We're not